Welcome to Formembering. My name is John W. Samples, your host, and in just a minute you'll be meeting my co-host, John C. Samples, who is also known as my dad. You'll also meet Al G. Lubeau, who's going to help us with some technical understandings of the trappings surrounding types of dementia, and much later he may even have some unexpected smiles for us. But that last part remains to be seen or heard. This is Season 1, Episode 1 of Formembering. If you'd like some background on what led us to doing this podcast, I'd encourage you to visit our website at formembering.com. Among other things, there you'll find a 3-minute video of me introducing the concept and some of what brought me to the project, including my own memory issues, particularly over the last 3 years. But in today's show, we'll be taking a quick look at the kinds of diseases that fit into the dementia category. We're all familiar with Alzheimer's, but there are others, maybe some you've not heard of. Our interview today will be with Mark Taylor from Cincinnati. Mark is the former head of Christian Standard Publishing, among other things, and will be sharing with us today about the road he is sharing now with his wife, Evelyn, who has 2 distinctly different diagnoses, and at least one of them is dementia. Dad and I will also be talking with Mark about his current writing project entitled The Unchosen Journey, where he shares candidly about his wife's diseases, his own struggles, and how he finds joy, and not, every day. I'm also going to share with you about the music you're hearing in the background right now. It is a new instrumental version of a song that is very, very special to our family. Not just because of how it speaks, if unintentionally, to the dementia journey, not just because of who wrote it, but because of where it was written, and because of the story it was first meant to tell. And we'll play the original version for you with the original lyrics at the end of this show. And yes, we do have permission to use it, so please don't go call your cousin the copyright lawyer. One more note. If you're listening to the podcast on one of your favorite platforms like Spotify or Audible or Apple Podcasts, thank you. And I hope you enjoy taking us with you on your way to work or while you exercise or whatever else you do while you listen. If you're watching us on YouTube or directly from the Formembering website, you'll find a few extras thrown in as we go along, some visuals relative to what we're talking about, but not so many that the folks that are just listening will feel like they're missing something, even if they might be. For example, this photo of my college roommate. He's advertising a radio program that he lets me play on from time to time, so I think we call this cross-pollination. It also is on your favorite podcast platforms. Just look for Wyatt Matters with host Steve Wyatt. And whether you are listening or watching, you'll need to listen to the Wyatt Matters episode for January 19th, 2025 to figure out what's wrong with these eyes. That's Wyatt Matters with Steve Wyatt. Okay, right now let me tell you about our sponsor. Actually, our first sponsor is www.johnwsamples.com, because if I can't get anybody to pay me to talk, I'll just sponsor this podcast myself. That URL is also jsam.com. And there you can learn about our JSAMs. Those are the people in our family whose first name starts with J and then Samples. You can find out about them. You can find out about our books. A whole bunch of my Preaching Father's recorded sermons are up there. Some info about our daughter-in-law and how great she is about making babies. No, not that. Joelle is a holistic health coach with an incredible track record of working with couples who are experiencing fertility issues. And of course, there's some great links to my wife's businesses, but I'll talk more about that later. We'll be right back after this short listen to the music. Stay with me, the instrumental version. And welcome back to Formembering. I'm very pleased right now to introduce you to Mr. Al G. Lubeau. Al is not real. In fact, he's completely artificial. But he sure seems to be more intelligent than I am. Al, welcome to the program. And why don't you tell the folks a little bit about yourself, including how you got your name?
Thank you. I'm Al G. LeBeau, your friendly AI assistant. My name is a playful nod to being an algorithm. I'm here to share insights on various topics, including dementia.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And that G, what does that G stand for?
The G in Al G. LeBeau stands for Gorithim, as an algorithm. It's a fun way to highlight that I'm an artificial intelligence here to help.
All right. Well, let's get on with the serious work here, Al. Let me tell the folks at home, though, that if you're watching the video, this is Al's self-portrait of what he thinks he looks like.
Thank you for the introduction.
Okay.
It's great to be here.
Right.
So, what can I help with today?
Al, when we talked earlier about the different kinds of diseases that are covered by the dementia umbrella, you did a really nice job summarizing that for me. But instead of me just reading what you wrote, would you mind sharing the list with our listeners?
Of course. Dementia encompasses several diseases, including Alzheimer's disease, vascular dementia, Lewy body dementia, and frontotemporal dementia. Each type has unique characteristics, but generally involves a decline in cognitive function.
Is there any quick comparison you can make between them?
Absolutely. Alzheimer's disease is the most common form, primarily affecting memory and thinking skills. Vascular dementia is often caused by reduced blood flow to the brain. Lewy body dementia includes symptoms like visual hallucinations and movement issues. Frontotemporal dementia mainly affects personality and behavior. Each has distinct patterns, but shares a common thread of cognitive decline.
All right. Thank you, Al. Do you happen to have any statistics on what the chances of someone over, let's say, 65 years old, what are the percentage chances of them getting one of these dementias according to population statistics?
Yes. Around 10% of people over 65 have dementia, with Alzheimer's being the most common type. The risk increases with age, so it's something many people and families need to be aware of as they get older.
All right. And that starts to get us deep into our topic today. Al, I appreciate you being here. Thank you for your help, and we'll come back to you a little bit later in the show.
You're welcome. I'm here whenever you need me. Enjoy the show.
All right, we're going to take one more quick listen to the music we've been playing, and right after this quick break, we'll meet today's guest, Mark Taylor. So where did we get the name of our show, Formembering? Well, we made it up. But when I first had the thought, I went to the dictionary to see if somebody else had already made it up. And here's what I thought I would find. Formembering. Noun, maybe more of a verb somewhere in between. First definition, where forgetting and remembering become intertwined. For example, too many of us are formembering the past and present without distinction. And two, supporting our community in the challenges of retreating memories. For example, in remembering today's trials and hopes, we share the road toward a better tomorrow. All right, welcome back, everybody. And we are thrilled to have as our first guest, and by first guest, I mean first guest here on our podcast, Mark Taylor. Mark was the publisher, editor, and I'll let him tell whatever else he did for Christian Standard Publishing in Cincinnati for many years. And Mark, before you clarify any mistakes I make, am I right that you were my dad's boss at one point?
Oh yes. Oh yes. I mean,
Outstanding.
all this gray hair, where do you think it came from? I don't think I was his boss. I think we were colleagues. And then I had a position that would have made me his boss later, but I don't believe I ever was your boss, John. We were just colleagues.
I remember being in a position to negotiate with you when you were moving to the Lookout, because I was kind of overseeing the previous editor. What's his name?
That's a good start to the show, Dad.
I moved to the Lookout in 1976. I stayed there for 14 years, and then I did a bunch of other administrative, marketing, management type stuff for a number of years. And John and I worked together when I was at the Lookout. I moved out of the Lookout, and we were colleagues, traveling together and all that stuff. And then I moved over to Christian Standard.
My point is that if Dad wanted to get anything published in anything at the Christian Standard, he still had to go through you. So in my mind, that sort of gave you this
Well,
authority thing over
when I was
him.
editor of the magazine, that's true. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's true.
yeah. All right. Well, I guess I should introduce my father then. This is John C. Samples, or as we call him around here, the other John. I'm the other John technically, but this is my podcast. So today he's the other John. In ministry for 60 years or longer. How many years do you use on your resume, Dad?
Actually, I use 55.
Okay, 55 years.
Yeah.
And he does keep his resume up to date. So if anyone is looking for a 91-year-old to come in and help out around, he's your guy.
I think in light of what you just said, I need to add, I just baptized a man.
That's
So,
right.
I'm at it.
Well, and we might as well mention that he also just bought a new pickup truck with a
Okay,
10-year bumper to bumper warranty. All right, got all that out of the way. Mark, you are on a really tough journey, and you've been doing it out loud. Your blog, which we'll talk more about, called The Unchosen Journey, was part of the inspiration for this podcast, and or maybe I should say encouragement. I'm not sure what the right word is. Any of those work, but I would really like to drill into some of this with you. And but before I get going with questions, I'd like you to just give us a quick summary of this journey with your wife Evelyn, when it started, what the main milestones have been.
We confirmed a diagnosis of Alzheimer's with Evelyn in 2019. I'm realizing now as I reconstruct the history that her doctor was using that word with us in 2018, but she didn't do a very good job of sitting across the table and saying, Evelyn, you have Alzheimer's, and in 2018. And so I stayed in denial until that neurologist left the practice. We got a new one who was a gift from God, among many gifts from God that have been showered upon us. He is one of them. He pushed us to do the analysis of spinal fluid, a test which I knew was available, but I had sort of I think in denial or whatever, I had sort of said, well, we're not going to do that because it won't change the treatment plan, regardless of what it shows. He was insistent that we do the test, the spinal fluid test, which showed the levels of amyloid and tau that confirmed a diagnosis of Alzheimer's. And we received that word from him the week before Christmas in 2019. I think 2 years later, 2 or 3 years later, he saw something in her that made him a little suspicious, sent us for another test. This was a brain scan that is, you drink these isotopes and wait a couple hours, and then, I don't know, there's a 2 or 3 step process. We were there, went and ate lunch, came back before they actually do the brain scan. The stuff you drink filters out everything except the dopamine levels in the brain. And the presence of dopamine, or the lack of it, is an indication of Parkinson's disease. That test confirmed that Evelyn also has Parkinson's disease. And so we've been living with that dual diagnosis for at least 3 years. So that's been what's been going on here. So, this month we will be 5 years away from that confirmed diagnosis and 6 years away from the time when her doctor, the previous doctor, really knew that she had Alzheimer's. So, in a way, it doesn't seem that long, and in other ways, it has been long. But
Well,
that's
one
that's the chronology of it.
one of the things we want to do here is to talk to people like yourselves who are in caregiving positions, even people in the early throes of a dementia diagnosis.
Right.
And so one of the questions that frankly I want to ask for my own peace of mind, are you uncomfortable talking about this? Like, I mean, clearly you write about it. And so, for those of us on the outside looking in, we're uncomfortable talking about it, especially to people who are in the throes of it.
If there's some detail or specific that I think we shouldn't talk about, just out of respect for Evelyn, I won't. But no, I'm not uncomfortable talking about it. It's sort of therapeutic to talk about it, I guess. And one of the reasons I started the blog 2.5 years ago was I was talking about it to friends and family members, and they, two or three different people from different parts of my life said to me, "Well, Mark, you thought about writing about this at all?" And so that's why I started writing the blog. I sort of, I didn't want to write about it initially because Evelyn was still reading Facebook, still, I didn't want to talk about her behind her back. Um, and actually, even when I started the blog, which is getting into what you want to get to later, I guess maybe, unchosenjourney.com is the address. When I started the blog, I did show it to Evelyn and said, "Here's this thing I'm going to start. I'm going to talk about our life with this disease, and there's a section in there where other people can tell their stories." And I showed her a few the introductory pages for the initial design. I just wanted you to know that I'm doing this, and she was nonplussed by that. But I didn't want to feel like I was doing it behind her back. Now it's been, I would think, it's been some time since, probably a couple years since she's really paid any attention to what I've written there. I've never made a point of showing her what I've written, but so no, I've been sort of out there. So I'm not uncomfortable talking about it.
Well, I think Dad's got a question for you, but before we come back to him, can you give us some kind of a synopsis as to how Evelyn is right now, and particularly in context to, one of the phrases that we hear often is, um, they're there, but they're not there.
Well,
Um,
Evelyn moved into a memory care community in April, and so it's been that many months that she's been there. We've settled into a pretty uh, predictable routine since then, although there have been one or two bumps in the road. She's quite content there. One of the huge blessings that has been ours is that she never one time asked about going home, never one time was upset when I left. Um, so that has been just without trauma, without stress, without drama. That's the better word. And so that's been terrific. We're not sure what she would say about any of us when we're talking to her. She's always, generally always, not always, sometimes she's sort of blank, but generally she's very pleasant and glad to see us, and big smiles eventually. Whether she really knows who we are or not, I don't know that she does. And one of the staff members where she's living said that she knows you and she knows that there's something special about you and she knows that you're here regularly. She just can't really, she may not always know exactly who you are. A couple of weeks ago, Evelyn is receiving hospice care now, and I can explain that if you want me to. But the hospice nurse was sitting with her, and I happened to be there while they were together. And so she said to Evelyn, "Well, what is your name?" She, "Evelyn Taylor." "Well, what is this guy's name?" She thought about it for a little while. She was preoccupied with something in her lap. "Mark Taylor." The nurse said, "Well, now who is he to you?" She didn't pay any attention. She didn't answer. Nurse, "Is he your son?" She looked up and with great certainty said, "He's my brother." And we laughed about that. So that it's a little bit difficult to define what's really happening inside that brain. I felt that way for 5 years, but that's kind of where we are today. People say, "How is she?" She's fine. She's content there. She's not really suffering. She's getting good care. Um, and I think she's as good as she could be.
so am I crossing the line when I ask how's Mark doing?
Well, I've been the recipient of so many blessings, so much encouragement from from God, and as He has sent those blessings to me through other people and other situations. And so there's really nothing to complain about. It did dawn on me that she moved in April, and she's in all the months that she's been there, it's been warm weather, sunny weather, long days, lots of time outside, working in the yard, piddling around with digging in the dirt here and there, pulling weeds, whatever. And now winter has set in, and I do. I thought all of my adjustments were behind me. I thought, well, I've thought this more than once. Okay, I've dealt with it, and here's our routine, and I've accepted it, and this is how it is. And so, we're moving on. I'm doing the best I can to make the most of my life and do something good with my life. But winter is going to be yet another set of adjustments, I think. And I think acknowledging that is probably the first step towards coping with it. So that's kind of where I am.
Well, thank you, Mark, and hopefully you sharing so candidly like that will help someone else who is entering some of these same seasons. Dad, do you want to jump in here?
I know, Mark, that a lot of people are reading The Unchosen Journey. I do every time I get one. And and there are things that you point out in there as you move along in this process that people find helpful. And I am learning from it. I think, uh, we went through a similar problem with our daughter-in-law. A lot of what you were saying and a lot of what you write just resonate with me. And I think that's happening in a lot more situations than perhaps you know about. You bring in these new thoughts that just really help me, um, not only with what we went through with our daughter-in-law, but my wife passing away. For instance, you wrote about not moving on, and then you decided I can move forward, but I can't move on. That's a simple statement, but it never occurred to me.
One of the a former Conti colleague slash friend, a person I knew who was reading my blog, actually helped me understand that idea in a comment she wrote one day to my blog, and she quoted a psychologist, counselor, psychiatrist, somebody who expounded on that. And it helped me so much that I did want to share it with others because I do think it's a helpful way to think about coping with grief or any kind of loss. Any kind of loss will bring grief, I've been told and I've learned. Any kind of change, it's healthier to think about moving forward rather than moving on. Moving on suggests that we put it behind us, and that just isn't true. And I read a little meme on Facebook today that I need to go back and find again that talked about how the grief, you encounter grief and you think, well, this is something that we'll deal with, and then we'll move on. Sort of like painting the house or getting your gallbladder out or something. And and that's just not the way grief is. It sticks with you as a companion, perhaps for the rest of your life, depending on the severity of the grief. Not that it undoes you, and not that you don't move forward. Um, I've always believed that balance is an elusive goal in all of life, and I think that on the one hand, we know people who wallowed in their grief and they don't seem to ever have learned how to cope with it. And then there are other people who are in denial about their grief. They're not sad. They won't cry at the funeral, not because they can't, but because they won't, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And that is, I've been told, that is very, very damaging to deny the feelings of loss that you're coping with. So finding that middle ground, I think moving uh, moving forward is the way to stay on this in the center of the path, as it were. So I appreciate you mentioning that because it wasn't my idea, and continuing to think about it has continued to help me too, John.
Well, it prompted in my mind. One day I had to decide that self-pity is a sin because I was missing opportunities to grow. And so anyhow, reading your Unchosen Journey has been a big help to me. I just wanted to thank you for it.
Great to hear. Thank you, John. I appreciate that a lot because you've been a big help to me in many ways.
You both are helping me because Dad and I did my brother's funeral, however, 30 years ago or more. And Dad and I did my mom's funeral.
Mm.
Uh, I can remember some tears before those events, but once the funeral started, I look back and I'm thinking, boy, that was kind of cold. So I think I still have some work to do, and I thought that before today, but this is kind of reinforcing that I've
Well,
got some things to get in touch with.
and I do think, I mean, I think that I cry all the time. That's my nature. I'm a crier. Some people are not, though. One thing people are telling me about grief is that there's a pattern for it, but not a script. And I think the point is to be working on it and acknowledging it, not to be criticizing how I'm expressing it. So, give yourself some grace, John, and
Well,
continue to do your work. That's
I,
fine.
I was going to say you're nicer to you than I am to me, so we'll keep working on it. And this, in all honesty, this podcast is part of that for me. I've mentioned that I'm dealing with some issues myself. I have no diagnosis, but it certainly has made my heart more sensitive to those who are experiencing dementia in whatever category. A couple more things from your blog, if I may, and you kind of touched on it, but just want to see if there's more to say there. Uh, One week you talked about uh, the lament from Lamentations, and then you talked about it's okay. Then the next time you're talking about it's okay to still be lamenting. Is that it's clearly related to how you're dealing with grief, but it seemed more specific in the way that you were writing it.
A few weeks after our diagnosis in January of 2020, then a good friend, actually a family member, sent me a book called Dark Clouds, Deep Mercy. It's written by a pastor in Carmel, Indiana, who's explored the topic of lament and what the Bible says about it. The book, I just couldn't put it down once I started it because it was so very, very helpful to me, and especially his examination of the Psalms of Lament and the discovery that I made there by virtue of that guidebook was that I guess I knew this, but I hadn't thought about it. It's okay. It's okay to tell God exactly how we're feeling. It's okay to complain to God. It's okay to wave your fist in the air or slam the table with your hand at the difficulty, the seeming unfairness, the pain, the unendingness of whatever situation you're in. And he recounts in his book the death, the birth of his stillborn daughter, and after struggles with conceiving that he and his wife had, and the terrible pain that was. But that opened him up to invitations to lament to people in his circle of ministry, and the reasons for lament are as long as the number of people in the room. Infertility, some sorts of addiction, any kind of disease, any kind of loss, disappointments, may all be reasons for lament. And the point is that the psalmist, David and other writers of the Psalms, were quite felt quite free to tell God how terrible it was and to say, God, where are you? And how long is this going to go on? Now, the writer of the book's point is that that's fine, just keep talking to God. But those lament psalms almost always end then with an acknowledgement of what God has done, who God is, and will continue to trust him in the midst of this injustice. And the point he makes is the worst thing you can do is quit talking to God. And I've written about and told about a friend I had who claims he was an atheist, and he says he was an atheist because he prayed and prayed and prayed for his wife to get well, and she died anyway. And he couldn't see how a loving God could have let that happen, didn't answer his prayer. Well, that's the course of action we can't, is not healthy to take, either, I think, emotionally and certainly not spiritually. So the point is keep talking to God. And if you feel bad about what's happened in your life, tell him, because we have a great pattern for that in the Bible that is generally ignored or forgotten about in so many churches today. And we could go off on a dog leg there, but I in some groups from a Christian tradition, lament is a part of the liturgy or whatever. In many evangelical churches, it's just not. There's no space for that. And these people coming out of the woodwork to tell me how much my blog has meant to them are just one indicator of all the pain that is in those pews. And people need to know that it's healthy, okay, it's a spiritual exercise to talk to God about it, to be sad about it. So um, this has helped me. Now, when I started thinking about this and writing about it, I've never really had uh, raging out loud experiences of complaining to God about what was going on. I was sad a lot, but I've never really had a problem with the problem of evil because I understand that evil comes in all of our lives. I don't think that we should uh, curse God because our wife dies. I think we should curse the devil because we live in a broken world um, where he is given free rein and to cause disease and relationship problems and all the negative things that we feel, the negative emotions we feel. I think we can blame all of that on Satan. And so let's curse him. But still, there's this yearning for God, who we believe is over all and in all, to do something. And actually, I've had periods of that in the last year that I hadn't had, but when I first started thinking about it, not periods, moments. And
I seem to recall
okay,
someone in my youth um, telling me that it's okay to have those kind of conversations with God because God already knows what we're thinking anyway.
right,
And so to not say those things to God slash to ourselves, I think I got to this point on my own, but it's a little bit of dishonesty to tell God you're okay when you're not okay.
exactly, exactly. And we all want to be okay. That's the persona we want to project. And I suppose social conventions require that. We've all known people that you talk to them for 3 minutes and they're weeping in the hallway, and we're uncomfortable with those people, and they may not be real healthy to, to get there that fast. But um, by the same token, I don't think we need to feel compelled. This is not a 55-minute network TV drama that all the problems have to be solved before we get to the last commercial. Sometimes it just goes on. The handicap does not leave. Um, the disease does not get healed. The prodigal son does not return. And so I think that we can experience joy and many other good things that God blesses us with in the midst of that grief, sorrow, sadness. Um, and I actually think it depends on your temperament, but I think expressing it to God protects us then from despair.
Dad, I'm going to give you the last shot at him here if you want here in just a minute. But I am hoping to be able to have future conversations with you as this journey progresses. And so, an invitation anytime you've learned something new that you would like to share with the readers of your blog or the listeners of the podcast or both. I would hope you'd be willing to come back and do that because this has been encouraging to me. In the meantime, Dad, you want to, this guy who kept you from getting all those great writings in Christian Standard Publishing, any final thoughts for him?
Well, I just appreciate at 91 years of age getting to relearn, because I think that's why you were talking about lamenting just now. I was aware that Psalms did that, but I was not personally aware of how much I needed to hear that the way you stated it. And I think that's what's happening with a lot of people who are reading your posts and your blogs, that they're just relearning the difference between on and forward, or lamenting and cursing. that there is a process that we can have the joy that only God can give, and happiness goes real. It's flimsy.
Right.
The joy that God gives us, as you so clearly have stated in this section on lamenting, it's just incredible, incredible. Thank you, Mark. Thank you for what you do. I love you, brother.
Well, I love both of you guys too, and it's a great encouragement to me to know that I'm not crazy and that
I don't think anybody deduced that.
no, the fact that you can let me say all this stuff and say, well, yeah, that's not weird. That's a great encouragement to me too. So,
Well, the weirdest thing that I've read on your blog was the entry about joy.
hmm.
And seems like it was sandwiched right in there between the two posts on Lamentations. Uh, can you throw something at us from that to end on?
Well, I think that your dad has said it. Joy and happiness; those words are used interchangeably, and I understand that. But they're not the same. Happiness depends on what happens. And so if I like steak and I get a good steak dinner, I'm happy, at least, until the indigestion sets in. But joy is a gift from God, and it's existing in the soul because of our trust in Him and our belief that that He is in control, and that He is with us even though our house just burned down. That doesn't make us happy, but we can have joy, I think. And I'm still learning about that. What does that mean, and how do I achieve it? And what part of it is my will, and what part of it is God's gift? Um, I think that's to use that onward again, I think that's an ongoing pursuit.
Mark, thank you very much. I will say it now just to commit me to it, but I actually have a segment planned for the end of the podcast talking about humor around dementia. And
Mhm.
I don't know if I'm going to pull that off or not. And I'm going to do that after you leave. So in case I cross a line, you're not going to be mad at me online here. I hope it comes from that place of you're talking about that as people of faith, there is joy in times where there shouldn't be. I don't know any other way to say it. And that may not be exactly what you said, but that's what I heard.
Well, joy in times when it's not apparent to people watching that there ought to be.
There you go.
I put it that way. Yeah,
Very good.
you're
All
right.
right. Mark, thank you very much. Give Evelyn a squeeze for us, and don't ask her if she remembers who we were. Uh, but hopefully you will for a little while.
I'll remember. I'll never forget. Thank you,
Dad,
gentlemen.
Dad,
Thank you.
thanks for joining in here, Dad. I appreciate it.
Yeah, you bet.
My wife tells me that I have an awful habit of not knowing when to stop making jokes, and she's probably right. But it's a tough habit to break. And that doesn't mean I'm even usually funny, but that doesn't mean I stop trying either. We'll get back to that in just a moment, but while I'm talking about my wife, Bobby, let me tell you about the 3 businesses this lady is running. For more than 25 years, Bobby has been a safety trainer and consultant extraordinaire. You can learn more about her new Certified Safety Program Accelerator at thesafetyfirm.com. And somewhere along the line, she learned she could paint. And I don't mean houses. Her large format oils and acrylics hang in homes and businesses all over the country. And apparently, thinking she didn't have enough to do, last year she branched out into the fashion business, combining her art with fabric and clothing design. The girl's got it going on, and you can find out more about both of those art adventures at bobbyksamples.art, one of our sponsors for today's episode. And thank you, sweetie, for letting me record this podcast in your art studio. I don't have to tell y'all that there is nothing funny about dementia. So this is the part of the podcast where I'll probably get in trouble for the very first time here. But the fact is, many of us have had sweet moments with our loved ones, even in the midst of their suffering and our frustrations. I've called them sweet because even I know there's nothing funny about this, so I would never call them funny moments. However, I need to be true to that part of me that wants to make people smile. So I'm going to muster up the courage right now and I'm going to ask Al G. Lebeau to share a couple of his favorite original jokes about folks struggling with memories. We'll call them artificial anecdotes about the dementia road. Al, you're up, buddy.
Thank you. Did you know dementia has its perks? For one, you can laugh at the same joke over and over. And hey, you can meet new people every day, sometimes even in your own family.
Okay, next.
Here's another one. A classic. A doctor tells his patient, "I've got bad news. You've got cancer and dementia." The patient pauses, then says, "Well, at least I don't have cancer."
Okay, I'm going to give you one more chance, Al. Go.
All right, here's the last one. 3 older gentlemen are at the doctor's office for memory tests. The doctor asks the first man, "What's 3 times 3? He says, 274. The second guy goes, "Tuesday." But the third man proudly exclaims, 9. The doctor's impressed and asks, "How'd you figure that out?" The man replies, "Easy. Just subtract 274 from Tuesday."
Okay, I think that might be my favorite. So, thank you, Al. We appreciate you being here, and all the listeners. You can send your cards and letters to Al G. Lebeau in care of formembering.com. Thanks, Al. Before we close this episode with another sweet moment from my dad, let me tell you quickly about our next episode and a little more about our theme music. Next time on Formembering, I'll be sharing a couple of videos I shot as part of my efforts to journal my own memory issues. They were shot 1 month apart, were about the same lost memories, and I did not remember shooting the first one when I shot the second. For me, it was pretty creepy, frankly. And if I can go through with this, it will be to share what I suspect others are experiencing as well. I'm not really crazy about putting these out there, but nobody's making me do this podcast, so I guess I need to do this kind of thing. Anyway, that's on the next episode of Formembering. Now, back to the music. In 2009, our daughter, at the time Lieutenant Elaine Samples, was deployed to Kuwait as a Black Hawk helicopter pilot with the Indiana National Guard. While there, her and one of her Black Hawk pilot friends, Lieutenant Jen Householder, wrote some music together. As they were winding down their deployment, they began thinking about going back to the real world and wondering how their friends and families back home would receive them. One song they wrote has become one of my all-time favorites and shows up regularly on my playlist around the house and my headsets in the car. As I was listening to it the other day, while working on this podcast, my wife says, that song would be perfect for talking about dementia in the community of caregivers. I initially balked, but then I listened. Wow. So I'll leave you with this thought. The whole world is concerned with being left behind, and I'm not talking about the rapture. I'm talking about our parents, the marginalized of society, the kids getting bullied on the playgrounds, and I'm talking about our friends and family that still know they have a dementia disease. And I'm talking about the ones that are trying so hard to do the next right thing with them. They're saying, stay with me. Please listen right after we hear from Dad one more time. Thank you for formembering with us today. I'm John Samples. See you next time. Dad?
The last conversation I had with Joyce, I came in, she'd been kind of in and out of a coma or non-responsive state. And this was just the week she died. And I came in and she had her eyes open. I thought, well, she went away in the night. Then I looked and she was still breathing. So I sat down on the stool beside her and I said, good morning, dear. And she slowly turned her eyes to me and she said, the girls that work here in this funeral home have a lot of fun. I was absolutely blown away. A few moments together, my thoughts. So I just started talking to her about the funeral home and the girls and what they do. And that was the last conversation I had with her.
stay